Hey, fourth grade. Sorry, it's Mrs. Veropoulos with King Arthur. So we're going to do the prologue and chapters 1 through 3 today, and hopefully leave some comments and tell me what you think, okay? So the prologue is the coming of Merlin. Merlin, the wizard, caused Arthur to be king of Britain. No one else knew that Arthur was a prince and that he had been given Merlin to watch over in secret and brought to the throne. Merlin's boyhood is as hidden as Arthur's. Before Arthur was king, his father Uther resigned, and before Uther became Vortigern. During the reign of Vortigern, Merlin first appears as a 9-year-old boy. In Merlin's youth, the island of England, Scotland, and Wales were called by two names, Logres or Britain. The Romans called it Britain from the name of a tribe of people living in it, but Logres was the name that its own people used. From the beginning, it was an island of marvels, with its mysterious temple of Stonehenge, its white-robed druids, and its gold and its pearls. Okay, does everybody know what Stonehenge is? There's a picture there of Stonehenge, and Stonehenge is a big round stone monument. Prehistoric circle of stones in Salisbury, England, used by ancient peoples for religious ceremonies. And the Druids are Celtic priests and wizards. I have a picture of Stonehenge from when my mother went. I'll remember next time and I'll show you. The stormy seas that beat its coast prevented traders from reaching the island early and added to its mysteries. In the 1st century after the birth of Christ, the Romans conquered Britain and added it to their empire. They brought peace to the island, built roads and towns, and taught the people how to obey the laws and live peacefully together. Among the Roman soldiers were some who had been told about Jesus Christ, and they spread Christianity to the people in Britain. 400 years went by. Britain prospered, but Rome weakened. Her armies had to be drawn back nearer to Rome itself, and by the year 410, the last of the soldiers left the island. By this time, a great many of the British people were Christian. They had built churches and decorated them with beautiful work in gold and silver. Tales of these riches reached the people living along the coasts of Europe, where nobody was a Christian. These heathen men were brave but savage and greedy, and they worshipped gods who they believed demanded men should fight and kill each other. This belief, combined with their greed for the beautiful things in Christian churches, urged them to raid the coasts of Britain as soon as the Roman troops were gone. And it says in here, heathen is one who does not believe in the God of the Bible. The ending of winter storms was the signal for raiders from all over Denmark and North Germany to cross the narrow seas and to turn and rob the villages of eastern and southern Britain. That sounds like the Vikings, if you ask me. What do you think? So it came dark days for Britain. Churches were robbed, priests and other people were killed or taken as slaves. British chiefs resisted, but some were traitors who made peace with the invaders in order to oppress the people themselves. Men spoke of the days when Britain was peaceful and united under one rule. They longed for a good king who would bring back peace, order, and justice. Christianity was in danger too, for few priests or hermits were left alive to teach people. So it says hermits down here, someone who lives alone and apart, often for religious reasons. Maybe you guys feel like hermits this last couple weeks, huh? Living all with nobody else but family. At last, one British lord named Constantine set up a little kingdom of peace and order in the southwest. People believed that he was the king they longed for. He had 3 sons, Constans, Aurelius, and Uther. But when he died, a Welsh lord named Vortigern arranged the murder of young Constans, an heir, and made himself king of Britain. Vortigern was one of those lords who made friends with the Saxons, but he was soon to know the treachery of the invaders. One of his old allies, the Saxon Hengist, came into southern Britain with a great army and feast that was held at Stonehenge. And the Saxons are a tribe of invaders from northern Germany. The British lords sat down unarmed, thinking all were friends, but the Saxons hid daggers under their cloaks, and at a signal from Hengist they fell upon the British while a toast was being drunk and killed almost every man. Vortigern was taken prisoner, and to save his life he gave away his lands and villages to the enemy instead of defending them to the death. Then Vortigern escaped death from the enemy camp. He fled westwards to his own land of Wales, snatching what sleep he could day by day, and running by night, until at last he found safety in a cave in the Welsh mountains. There the British began to gather around him to resist the hated Saxons, who were slaying people and burning buildings all over southern Britain. The first need was for a fortress. A wise man advised Vortigern to build a castle on the Mount of Rher, so he went there with his followers. First they dug a mighty moat all around the site. Working with desperate haste, they dug, cut down trees, measured and marked out where they were to build, mixed lime, and collected stones. Finally, they were ready to begin to build the wall above the moat. Each day, part of the great wall was built, but each night it fell to the ground. In the morning, they raised it once more. In the night again the stones fell, yet no man harmed the wall. Thus they labored for a week, growing more and more afraid as news came that Hengist was coming nearer. Then Vortigern sent for all the Welsh wizards and commanded them to tell them why the wall fell every night. One wizard, Joram by name, said that if a boy who had no father could be found, and if his heart's blood was mixed with the lime of the wall, then it would stand until the end of time. The saying was strange and mysterious, but the king obeyed it. He sent messengers all over Wales to search for a boy who had no father. 2 of the messengers went to Carmarthen, and outside the wall town found a broad meadow where boys were playing. The king's men were tired, and they sat down in the shade of a tree to rest, idly watching the boys. A quarrel sprang up, and 2 boys had a fight, one soon getting the better of the other. The lad who had been beaten ran off, shouting taunts as he ran. "You'll pay for this, nobody's son. I'm the son of a chief. You ought to be a slave. Who is your father? You never had one." The king's men, startled by the cries of nobody's son, asked what the uproar was all about. They were told that the boy's name was Merlin. He was a slim, strong boy about 9 years old, with black hair and light gray eyes. The men took him to one of the elders in town, Eli, who had said that it was true that Merlin was said to have no father and that his mother had become a nun. When the king's messengers explained their businesses, Eli brought the mother and son to the king's mountain stronghold. The mother told Vortigern that she was the daughter of the Welsh chieftain Conan. When she was 15, she began to fall into trances and see strange visions, and in these visions she came to know a tall knight clad in gold. Time after time he came to her. She knew neither his name nor where he came from, whether from God or the devil. Then he stopped coming and the visions stopped. Also afterwards Merlin was born. Alas, I do not know any more about how he came into the world. Megan, one of the king's wizards, told the king that the gold-clad knight was one of the creatures who live in the sky, neither an angel nor a man. They love to play tricks on people. One had taken the form of a handsome knight and deceived Conan's daughter. Merlin wanted to know why his history was being talked about. So the king told him the story of the falling wall and Joram's strange saying, which would mean the boy's death. Merlin looked around the group of magicians standing before the king in their magic robes and horned headdresses. He looked at the ring of warriors with their spears who guarded every way, and he was not afraid. He spoke out to the king. "Your wise men deceive you," he said. "I will tell you the truth about the wall and prove to you that they are lying. If I make the wall stand, give me their heads." The challenge was agreed to. Then Merlin cried, "Tell me, Joram, what shall men find at the bottom of the wall?" Joram did not know. "King, keep your promise," Merlin cried again. "Dig the moat 7 feet deeper. You will find a well-cut stone." They dug and found the stone. Merlin cried again, "King, keep your promise. Tell me, Joram, what is under that stone?" Joram was silent. He could not tell. So Merlin answered for him, "There is water under here. Take away the stone, and you will find water." And they did so, and again he challenged Joram, demanding that he tell them what lived at the bottom of the water. Joram still did not know. Merlin spoke, "King, keep your promise. Drain the water. Below live 2 dragons. One is milk white and the other blood red. At midnight they will begin to fight, and the earth shakes so that your wall falls. You do not need my blood to build it." All happened as Merlin foretold. When the moat was drained, out came 2 dragons, white and red. They sprang on each other and fought, but neither could kill the other. At last both dragons retreated into their holes and were never seen again. The king turned to Joram and his 7 magicians and ordered their heads cut off. Merlin now became the king's advisor. He warned him that soon young King Uther would land in Devon, and try as he might, Vortigern would never escape him. Then Uther would be Pendragon and bring peace to the land. Pendragon means means king. Then Merlin made his great prophecy. Uther shall have a son, Arthur, who will destroy all traitors. He will be the bravest man alive and the most noble in thought. All his foes he will strike to the ground. All I have told will come true. It all happened as Merlin foresaw. Uther landed and pursued Vortigern, who ran to a castle near the river Wye. Uther filled its moat with branches of trees, set fire to them, and burnt down the castle and Vortigern with it. Then Uther was king. Thus the destinies of Merlin and Arthur came to be fulfilled. Wow. That was the intro. This is now part 1, the founding of the Round Table. And chapter 1 is the birth of Arthur. The secret of the birth of Arthur, King of Britain, is hidden from us like the secret of his end. Although he was, as Merlin foretold, heir to Uther, no one can prove who his parents were. Those who say he was a man like other men tell the story thus. When Uther was Pendragon, he fought continually against the invaders. One of his own subjects fought against him as well, the Duke of Cornwall. Uther sent messages to the Duke, asking him to come to his court and make peace. He came and brought with him his wife, Igraine, who was both beautiful and wise. The king and duke made peace. There were feasts and sports and merrymaking, and the king, who was not married, fell in love with Igraine. As soon as she realized this, she said to the Duke, "Husband, take me away from here at once, and let us ride all night to our own castle." They did so, and the king prepared to make war on them. So here's Uther, as he was Pendragon. The Duke of Cornwall manned his 2 chiefs' castles and set Igraine to the one called Tintagel, while he himself defended Terrabil, which was famous for the secret doors and posterns in and out. Uther laid siege to Terrabil, but he could make no headway, and from anger and love of Igraine he fell sick. Then Sir Ulfius, one of Uther's knights, went to ask Merlin for help in curing them. A postern is a private door or a gate, and to lay siege means to surround a city or fortress with an army and attack it. He met the wizard dressed as a beggar on the road. Merlin told him that he would give the king all that he wished for in return if he would grant a wish of Merlin's. When they returned to court and told the king this, the king swore to do as Merlin told him. Merlin then said that when he married Igraine, he would have a child, and he must give it to Merlin to raise up. He promised that it would be good for the good of the child. Uther agreed, and Merlin then told him what to do to win Igraine. That day the king left the siege of Terrabil, leaving some of his men at camp there, and rode towards Tintagel. The duke's spies told him of the king's departure, and the same night the duke led an attacking party out of the posterns, and in the fighting the duke was killed. The news was brought the next day to the king, who was outside Igraine's castle at Tintagel. Then all the barons asked him to make peace with the lady Igraine. The king asked Sir Ulfius to take messages of goodwill to her, and at last Sir Ulfius persuaded Igraine to meet with the king. Uther asked her to be his queen, and they were married the next morning. In time a son was born to them. Merlin came to Uther and reminded him of his promise. Heavy-hearted, the king kept his word. Then Merlin said, "I know a lord of yours who is a very true man and faithful. His name is Sir Ector, and he shall take care of your child. Let the child be delivered to me at yonder Purston unchristened." That means without a baptism, a ceremony of pouring water on somebody's joining the church to symbolize the cleansing of his soul. The king ordered 2 knights and 2 ladies to take the child wrapped in a cloth of gold to the postern gate and give him to the unknown poor man who would be waiting. This was Merlin in disguise. He took the child, and what he did then no one knows, but what in time he brought him to Sir Ector, and there summoned a priest and had the child baptized and named Arthur. 2 years after this event, the king fell ill. Merlin summoned all the lords together and said in a loud voice, "Sir, after your days are gone, shall your son Arthur be king of this realm?" The king answered, "I give him my blessings. Tell him that he must claim the crown or lose my blessing." Then he died, and no one knew who his son Arthur was or where he was, except Merlin, who kept silent. Chapter 2, The Sword in the Stone. After the death of Uther Pendragon, there was no true king in Britain. No one but Merlin knew if Arthur really existed or where he was. The lords fought each other, and each tried to make himself a king. They built castles in which they themselves were safe, but from which they rode out to rob farmers and anyone who had wealth. They tormented those who would not say where their wealth was hidden. Great was the misery of Britain. Cries went up for a true king who would protect the poor and keep justice for every man. When Merlin knew that the time had come, he went to the Archbishop of Canterbury and said that if he would call the leading men to London at Christmas time, a miracle would prove who the rightful king of Britain was. So the Archbishop summoned all the chief men from the kingdoms to London at Christmas time. On Christmas Day, they went to church. They came out and found a churchyard square. In the churchyard square, a marble stone, in the middle of which was an anvil, and into the anvil was thrust a sword. An anvil is a heavy block on which a blacksmith shapes metal by hammering. The stone gripped the naked sword by the point, and on the blade was written in gold letters, "Whoever pulls out this sword from this stone and anvil is the rightful king of all Lorges." Here was the miracle foretold by Merlin. Each lord tried to pull it out, and all failed. Nobody could move it. News of the miracle was hurriedly told to all knights. A tournament was announced for New Year's Day, when the knights were each invited to try to pull out the sword. All the great lords met again on New Year's Day. Among them was Sir Ector, who brought his son Sir Kay, who had been made a knight at the previous Halloween. With them rode his younger brother Arthur, who was only 15 years old. He was not a knight and of no importance at all, nor was he really Kay's brother, although no one but Sir Ector and Merlin knew this. He did not even know it himself. After the church service, they all rode in merry company to the tournament field. Sir Kay suddenly realized that he had left his sword behind in his lodgings. There was no time for him to go back, for he was due to take part in the young knights tournament, so he asked Arthur to go back for him. Arthur went as fast as he could to their lodgings, but everyone had gone to see the fighting, and the house was locked. Arthur was angry and said, I will ride to the churchyard and take that sword and the stone, for my brother shall not be without a sword on this day. He found no one at the churchyard, for everyone had gone to see the tournament. So he took the sword by the hilt and gave it a light, quick pull, and out it came. He jumped on his horse, rode back to the tournament field, and gave Kay the sword. Now Kay, being a knight, knew the meaning of the sword and the stone. He recognized it at once. He unwisely thought he could deceive others about how he came by it. He went to his father and said, Sir, look, here is the sword of the stone, and so I must be king of England. Sir Ector was amazed, but he was a wise man, and he immediately took Kay and Arthur and went back to the church. He told Kay to swear how he came by the sword. Kay was frightened now and said, Sir, by my brother Arthur, for he brought it to me. Sir Ector looked at young Arthur, remembering how strangely Merlin had brought him in secret and as a newborn baby, and told him to bring him up as his own son, and promised that in time Merlin would reveal truly who the child was. How did you get the sword, Sir Ector? Slowly asked Arthur, standing by the altar in the quiet of the church. Arthur told him exactly what he had done. Now, said Sir Ector to Arthur, as I understand, you must be king of this land. I? Said Arthur, astonished. How can that be? Sir, said Sir Ector, using the title for the first time, because God will have it so, for no man could have pulled this sword unless he was the rightful king of this land. Now let me see whether you can put the sword back as it was and pull it out again. That is quite easy, said Arthur, and they all went outside in the frosty churchyard. There stood the white stone with the anvil wedged to the top, but no sword was in the anvil. Arthur went up to it and thrust the sword back into its slit, which gripped the blade hard. There's Arthur. And there's the stone and the anvil and the sword. Do any of you know what the sword's name is? Sir Ector tried to pull it out to see that there was no trick. He could not move it at all. Now you try, Sir Ector said to Sir Kay, and Sir Kay pulled with all his might. He could not move it. Now you shall try, Sir Ector said to Arthur. Very well, said Arthur, and he pulled it out easily. Sir Ector and Sir Kay knelt down before Arthur. My dear father and brother, said the boy, why do you kneel to me? Then Sir Ector told him that he was not his own son, but that Merlin had brought him as a baby to be brought up as his son in his household. Sir, said Sir Ector again, I will ask no more of you, but that you will make my son, your foster brother Sir Kay, a steward in charge of your lands. Arthur answered, that shall be done, and no other man shall have the office while he and I live. Then they went to the archbishop and told him what had happened. At the end of the New Year's tournament, on the Epiphany, all the knights tried the sword and none could move it. Then Arthur, who was not even a knight, drew it out. It was decided at last. Arthur took the sword in both hands and laid it on the altar where the archbishop was standing. Then he knelt down, and the best knight present was chosen to come forward and make him a knight. After that, the archbishop set on his head the crown. He didn't sit on his head, sorry. After that, the archbishop set on his head the crown of Britain, and wearing it, Arthur swore the king's oath to give justice to all men, high and low, all the days of his life. The people threw up their caps and shouted because a true king had at last come to punish the wicked and defend the poor. But many of the great lords were not pleased and refused to have a boy of 15 of unknown parents as king over them. They resisted so strongly that it was not until the summer feast of Pentecost that Arthur was acknowledged as the true king. Pentecost is the 7th Sunday after Easter, and it's also called Whit Sunday, when the Roman Catholic Church commemorates the gift of the Holy Spirit that Jesus gave to the apostles. The king took those who were not to be trusted away from their posts. Arthur knew that a peaceful reign did not lie ahead of him. There were fiercer raiders from over the seas, hostile British lords and strong castles, and even treacherous men among his advisors. A heavy task lay before him in ruling the kingdom rightly, or even in keeping his throne at all. Okay, last chapter for today, chapter 3, The Sword in the Lake. A few weeks after Arthur was made king, he went out riding early one morning. He carried only a light sword, not the one that he had pulled from the stone. That sword still lay on the altar where he had placed it at his coronation. As he rode down a wooded path, he came upon the wizard Merlin being attacked by 3 men. When they saw a knight on horseback bearing down on them, they all ran away. "Oh, Merlin," said Arthur, "if I had not been here, you would have been killed in spite of all your crafts." "No," said Merlin, "I could have saved myself if I wanted to. You are more near death than I am." As they went on, the track led to a fountain. Blocking the way was a knight in black, sitting in a chair. He refused to let them pass without fighting him, and it was said was his custom. "Anyone who does not like my custom can alter it if he can." "I will alter it," said Arthur. So the knight got on his horse, and they took their spears and charged at each other. Each spear shattered in splinters on each shield. They leapt off their horses and fell upon each other with their swords. The blows rang on their armor and ripped great gashes through their leather joints so that their blood ran out. As they struggled back and forth, the trampled ground became stained with blood. At last King Arthur struck a blow that his sword broke in two. The knight cried out that Arthur must yield. "I would rather die than yield to you as beaten," said King Arthur, and he sprang at the knight and took him by the middle and threw him down. But the knight was a much heavier man than Arthur, and he wrestled so fiercely that he got Arthur down under him and held him helpless. As he raised his dagger to kill the king, Merlin cast a spell over him, and he fell into a deep sleep. Merlin helped Arthur up, mounted the knight's horse, and they rode away to have Arthur's wounds dressed. The king was angry because he thought Merlin had beaten the knight, who had fought fairly and bravely, by using a spell. Here's them fighting. "I told you what a knight he was," answered Merlin. "You would have been killed if I had not been there. There is no mightier knight than he, and after this he shall do you good service. His name is Pellinore, and he shall have 2 sons whose names will be Percival of Wales and Lamorak of Wales. He will tell you the name of the son of your own sister, who shall cause the destruction of all his kingdom." This was an evil prophecy, but Arthur was too young to be worried over a child who was not yet been born. As they rode, the king said, "I have no sword." "Never mind," answered Merlin. "Near here is a sword that shall be yours." So they rode until they came to a lake, in the middle of which Arthur saw a strange sight, as strange as the marble stone and anvil in the churchyard. Rising out of the water was an arm, clothed in soft white silk, holding a sword in hand. "Look," said Merlin, "there is the sword that I speak of." As they gazed, they saw a boat moving across the water with a damsel in it. A damsel is a young unmarried woman. "That is the Lady of the Lake," said Merlin, "and under that lake is a rock. Inside that rock is a fair place as any on earth, and richly kept. The damsel is coming to you, so speak well to her, and she will give you the sword." There's the sword being held up. The boat drew to land, and the lady greeted Arthur, who returned her greeting. "Damsel," he said, "what sword is that yonder arm holds above the water? I wish it were mine, for I have no sword." "Sir King Arthur," she answered, "that sword is mine, and if you will give me a gift when I ask for it, you shall have it." Arthur knew that Merlin would have warned him if the lady had been an enemy, so he replied, "By my faith, I will give you whatever you ask." "Very well," she said. "Get into the boat and row to the sword. Take it and the scabbard with you, and I will ask for my gift when I see my time." So Arthur and Merlin got off their horses, tied them to 2 trees, and went into the boat. They rowed across the lake to the mysterious arm, and when they reached it, Arthur took the sword by the hilt. The hand let go, and the arm sank back under the still water. They rowed straight back to the shore. The lady of the lake had disappeared. Whoops. I missed a word. Sorry. The king sprang out of the boat, and once safely on shore, examined the sword and saw how magnificent it was. Its name, Excalibur, was carved into the blade, and below it on one side was written, "Take me," and the other, "Cast me away." Then they rode back to the court in Caerleon. Arthur's friends were thankful to see him, for no one had known what had happened to him. He told them all his adventures, and they were amazed that he risked his life single-handed. But all true knights were proud to serve under such a leader, who would put himself in danger like any ordinary knight. So, Excalibur is King Arthur's sword, and Merlin is his wizard, and there's going to be a lot more adventures to come in the next few chapters. I hope you guys have a great day. Stretch a little bit. I know you've been sitting, and I'm looking forward to reading the next 3 chapters with you. Till then, have a great day. Bye.